Cathaoirleach. Can I thank the Green Party for bringing forward this motion, or this bill. I want to say, as my colleague has said before me, that we do support the thrust of the bill. We do acknowledge it builds on the commitment contained within the All-Party Committee. We would seek to play our part, as would many others, I'm sure, to debate and change and alter, but by agreement arrive at a conclusion whereby we can all move forward to address the issues that need to be addressed. And that's notwithstanding the realisation that we all have, on all sides of the House, in relation to what is necessary in order to ensure that the planet and our country and our economy and our environment works as one and works to the benefit of us all rather than to the detriment of any. I'm quite surprised to hear the Minister say, notwithstanding again the fact that he would allow passage of the bill for debate but may proceed with a money message when it gets to the relevant crossroads. I would say he could supersede that by a type of hypothecate the carbon tax revenue, for example, with relevant legislation to ensure that that is in place in order to meet the demands of a commission such as this. I have to say, since especially the announcement by the likes of Bord na Móna last October of the acceleration of their decarbonisation plan, that I've been, to put it mildly, disappointed at Fine Gael and the government's response and reaction on two fronts. First of all, to that announcement itself, and despite the mood music and the right sentiments being expressed, as is oftentimes the case, the rhetoric wasn't matched by the sort of action that was needed. Secondly, I've again been disappointed, to say the least, at the government's failure to insist on the likes of ESB pursuing government policy and ensuring that they would move forward by last Thursday and appealed or sought a judicial review to the decision by Bord Bernard, considering it would be that decision flies in the face, as I said, of government policy, which was to co-fuel biomass and peat in the power plants and transition towards a move away altogether from peat, as we all adhered to and acknowledged and accepted the part that we had to play in order to ensure that that was a timely one, but during the time afforded there would be opportunities for alternatives to be found and options for that economy not to be thrown off the cliff, as is now possibly the case. Back in October, I remember speaking at leaders' questions in the days immediately after that announcement and seeking the setting up of a transition forum and commission, seeking verification that Ireland had applied to the coal regions in transition fund, seeking information in relation to EU globalisation fund, and then at that time also seeking the ring fencing of funding from the carbon tax revenue, which stands at 400 million per annum, or 400 million to date. The Taoiseach, I think it was, that answered, and he said that he and his government will work with people to ensure that people can plan for a fair deal and manage it in a way in which doesn't undermine incomes or regions. But we haven't seen the setting up of a relevant forum. We have seen in Offaly, for example, a transition team made up of stakeholders and state bodies whose job it would have been to respond in the way in which I've seen as a member of that forum, but with the fact that it does not have adequate targeting of government funds to especially deal with the situation there, rather than draw from existing funds through a wide range of options that are mentioned by the Minister, which is available to the country as a whole. In relation to the Shannon Bridge decision recently, as I said, it is government policy. It is government policy to co-fuel. That was contained in all the relevant documentation within all the relevant departments in relation to its submission to the EU, for example. But the An Taisce contention for an immediate cessation was carried by An Bord Pleanála. I know there were issues around transportation and so forth that could have been addressed by way of condition in relation to a permission and would have been addressed favourably and to the satisfaction of those who had raised concerns in relation to those issues. But as I said to you, Minister, during the course of our discussions in the immediate aftermath of that decision when you visited Tullamore and met with representatives from the region, I felt it was incumbent on you to ensure that ESB would indeed seek a judicial review of that decision, because I would have thought in the democratic process that we've grown to love and appreciate that you, as government, set policy and others follow it, rather than on Taoiseach setting policy and government of the day and Bord Pleanála following, and that appears to what has been what has happened. The knock-on effects of that decision are all too plain to me and to those that I represent, and I'm especially conscious and mindful obviously of Lanesborough Power Station and Eden Derry Power Station, because it will obviously mean almost immediate closure of those two and immediate cessation of harvesting associated with supplying those stations. So our workers and communities, counties and regions are being thrown off a cliff, rather than the commitment that was given to us last year that we would be phased out over a period of 7 or 8 years, and a transition forum with adequate funding will be put in place in the meantime to meet the demands of that. And the localities and the communities and the counties and the regions, as I said, bought into that. But to be thrown off the cliff flies in the face of that commitment that was given. Such a body that is proposed would fund, reward, assist local authorities, local transition forums in the various counties, and I'm mindful of the special status that I have within my own county, where it has up to 1,000 of the 1,500 or 1,600 workforce that remains in Bordnamona, for example. But that notwithstanding, the efforts and the commitments and the willingness and the appreciation there is for other counties to participate also, as others have mentioned, in relation to the role that it has played in their counties, in their communities and in the economies within those. So it would seek to reward and encourage innovation and entrepreneurship, and look at the options in relation to alternatives, not only in relation to energy but other forms of employment too. And I'm conscious too of the visit you had recently in relation to the new power plant, battery-powered power plant to support renewables and support wind, that was opened last week by an indigenous company down there in Tullamore called Lumcloon, who have partnered with backers in Korea at no cost to this state, and put private investment in place, and that innovation, that success can be the prototype for exportation to other economies, to other countries into the future, and that in itself is the sort of innovation and alternative form of employment, but within the energy sector, that can succeed. So to get back to the carbon tax funding and any increase that there may be within it, obviously there are 3 strands that would have to be contained in any legislation that would hypothecate or that would ring-fence those funds. It would have to be poverty-proofed. It would have to have initiatives and programmes and grants and rewards for relevant and efficient products and renewables that would help and assist those that we represent to provide alternatives, to provide different renewables, to provide different methods to help and assist the climate action plan that you mentioned earlier. But it would also have to have at its core a targeted fund allocated to those regions that are most affected by transition, especially the pace of transition, which is now no longer the 8 or 9 years that was envisaged at this time last year. The government of the day in the 40s, of course, gave that remit of creating jobs in the Midlands region to Bordnamona. But Bordnamona, with the best will in the world, can no longer withstand that remit, when you consider in the 80s they had 8,000 or so working there. Notwithstanding their efforts and their trials in relation to the growth of herbs and cannabis, and looking at the use of the land in relation to energy parks and so forth, I would hope and expect that those lands and those properties and those plant and the industrial plant and so forth would be there for others to invest in, would be there for these forums, this Commission, to bring forward ideas and initiatives that would benefit the communities and the regions that they are in. It could, for example, lead to energy parks that would reward communities, and the profits derived from it would reward communities. And this is the sort of innovation that we now pass over to the government, and that remit is back with the government. Board can no longer meet the commitment that they gave and the remit that they were given back in the 40s. So it's for local authorities, for example, to build on the success of the likes of Bord na Móna, to provide the package that is Loch Bora, that is Greenways, that is Clonmacnoise, that is the whole Midlands package and what it has to offer. And it's about all the stakeholders working together with the availability of the right funding, the right innovation and the right representation on that as is prescribed, which would allow communities bring us forward in a way in which recognises the needs associated with climate change, but also recognises the contribution that the state and its state bodies made to areas such as those that I represent, and is in a position to now recommit to them in a different way, in a new way, but equally in a way in which can reward those communities and allow people within them the opportunity to succeed, the opportunity to provide jobs, the opportunity to remain in the counties that they love and the lifestyle that they love. And I think that can be done with the right will and effort. And make no mistake about it, Minister, in the absence of this being done in the short few months that's available to you, this will be an election issue, and this will be an issue where support is growing for the sort of commitments that are contained within this bill and within the sentiments that have been expressed within our own policy, which is at variance with our own, and that is obvious and plain to see from last October to date.
We have, before I proceed